So do you see it, Kari?
Yes, I do.
Perfect, thank you. So thank you very much for two great presentations. Just briefly about myself, my name is Arne Lind. I work at IFE as a colleague of Kari. I'm currently in charge of the Renewable Energy Systems Department. So I've been working with energy system analysis, I've been working with hydrogen technologies. And I'm also at the moment operating agent of this Hydrogen TCP Task 41, which is about modeling and data collection of hydrogen parameters. So for those of you who are familiar with these Hydrogen TCPs, this is a follow-up to Task 38, which was called Power to Hydrogen, Hydrogen to X, as well as Task 30, Global Hydrogen System Analysis. So we are trying to take these two tasks further into Task 41. Like it has been said earlier today, the task has 4 subtasks, each one of them contributing to the overall goal of providing updated parameters describing hydrogen technologies, as well as to develop knowledge of how we should model hydrogen in the value chain. An important part of Task 41 is to have a closer collaboration with the Hydrogen TCP, between the Hydrogen TCP and the ETSAP community. So this was very related to what Paul Dodds just presented here. This project, or this Task 41, is expected to last until the end of next year. I don't know if it is possible to extend it, but that is at least the plan as it is at the moment. And if you want to know more about this Task 41 or other hydrogen TCPs, you can go into this to IEA Hydrogen and look at the web page there regarding the different tasks that are under operation and also previous tasks. And in Task 41, we are currently around 30 participants, but there's always room for more. So if you're interested in joining this task, don't hesitate to send me an email after this meeting. So to be a little bit more specific, what is it that we're trying to do in this task? And I always like to bring up this picture. This is something similar that Paul has showed in his presentations, but it is some of the different hydrogen value chains that exist out there. Like you all know, hydrogen can be produced from a variety of different sources, both renewable and conventional. It can be produced in different processes like electrolysis, steam reformation, partial oxidation, and so on. It can be distributed in a variety of different ways, either compressed, liquefied, in pipelines, or by ship, by boat, whatever. And it can be used in a lot of different end-use sectors, for example, for transport, but also for power generation and in industry and for heating. So, and what we're trying to do in this task is to describe not necessarily all of this, because that is perhaps way too difficult, but at least the most important one, the most important value chains. And by that, when I say describe them, I mean that we should identify how we should model them in different models. But also we want to put numbers on all of these different boxes. What does it cost, for example, an electrolyzer? What is the efficiency? And all other parameters that are relevant for all of these different technologies and other issues on this slide. So that is the overall goal of this task. So just to briefly sum that up, it's to provide an up-to-date database on hydrogen technologies. It's to improve the knowledge of how we should model hydrogen. So that is in general, not necessarily related to a times model, but in general, how should we model hydrogen? And also this collaboration between Hydrogen TCP and the ETSAP community. So this task is, as I said, divided into 4 different subtasks. I will describe 3 of them today. Subtask A, it's about data consolidation of parameters describing hydrogen technologies. So this is about gathering data. This is about putting data into a system, populating a database. So this work is being led by Laurence Grand-Clement from Paris, or from France. An activity well underway. The second task is about the modeling. So this is about how should we model hydrogen in the value chain and how shall we improve current methods? Or if you're not improving them, at least give an indication of how current methods or current models can be improved. So the objective here is to come up with a description of how an ideal model should model hydrogen technologies or hydrogen value chains. So this is, as I said earlier, this is looking beyond just times model, is about looking at models in general. But of course, we cannot look at every model, so we need to narrow the scope to some extent. This work is being led by Rod Dickinson from Australia. And we also have a Subtask C, which Paul Dodds recently presented some great outcome from. So I will go a little bit more into detail now. Subtask A, like I said, this is about data. So we are going to establish a database here. So, and we are not just going to establish a database. This database needs to be related to the models that are using this data. So we need to have that in the back of our head as well. So we are going to establish a data structure and an acquisition process in order to obtain or to generate a sustainable database, so that this can be used for modeling or for different models that model hydrogen in the value chain. So like I said, this is about establishing a database and all the underlying infrastructure, so that we, for example, could have a techno-economic description of the different process steps of a supply chain, as well as market and end use for hydrogen. So this is related to the illustration that I showed in the beginning. So we want to describe these different elements in a database with different parameters or different data. And once we have made this structure for the database, we are of course going to populate it with data. So we are going to do that with up-to-date data sets, as well as having a structured acquisition process. So we need to validate how we do this. We cannot just not fill this database with lots of random data. We need to have a structured and acknowledged acquisition process. Yeah, so we will cover various hydrogen value chains. I will not necessarily say all, but we will cover various. So we will focus on generation, processing, storage, distribution, and market and end use. We will cover both conventional, so by that I mean based on fossil fuels, as well as renewable-based processes. And if possible, we will use all the information that is available out there. So we will not start from scratch. So we will use data from Task 30 and Task 38 from the Hydrogen Implementing Agreement, as well as we will be in a dialogue with other TCP tasks, which are experts on certain hydrogen technologies. What we are going to look more closely at in this Subtask B, Subtask A, because it has been stated that we are going to look a little bit more closely at times models. So we are going to look specifically at what kind of data that are needed for times models and under which formats. What are the spatial and temporal resolution that are needed? How do we qualify data sources? And one thing that has come up several times is that how do we handle confidential data? Because we have already some of that, or is it a good way that we can anonymize it? How do we ensure represented data of hydrogen technologies and markets? And how do we define boundary conditions for the provided data and ensure alignment with other data sources? So this figure here, it just shows some of the different kind of data that we look at. We are looking at, of course, techno-economic parameters, typically relevant for times models. We're also looking at other macroeconomic and boundary data. We are studying legal and regulatory rules, field data. We're discussing what kind of units to put in the database. And there are also other issues which we have not concluded on yet. But this is the way it looks at the moment. And we also have a discussion about what kind of time time periods we are looking at. We of course will study the past data, what we already have. We will study ongoing data, so that is data that is available at the moment or relevant at the moment. But of course, if this is going to be used in an energy system model, we also need to have some thoughts about how these costs and other parameters will develop over time. And also, is there a differences in these parameters going from region to region is also an aspect that we will consider in this work. Yeah, so this describes a little bit how, when we are going to add new data to the database, so that this will be done in a correct manner, how to reference it to it, what kind of formatting it should be in, how do we validate it, and so on. But I will not go into more detail now. And this is some preliminary things that we are working on. We are supposed to publish some papers here, populating the database, as I said. So this is work in progress, and I will not. I guess this presentation will be available afterwards, so you can study that in more detail. Moving on to Subtask B, that is how should we model different hydrogen value chains. That can of course be done in different ways depending on what kind of model that you have. So the first thing that we are going to look at is, how does an ideal hydrogen modeling tool look like? What is the typical feature of such a tool? Or does such a model already exist? And if it does, what is that model? We are going to study how to appropriately represent technologies and intersectoral connectivity in the optimal way. We are going to look at how different groups model hydrogen technologies. Like I said, since we are collaborating with IEA, with ETSAP, our main focus, or at least our starting point, will be on times models, but a lot of other model approaches will be studied. So in this working group of around 30 people, there are more, the majority of them use other model approaches than times. So other model approaches will be covered in a good way. And for all of these models, we will study the advantages, disadvantages of the different modeling approaches related to hydrogen. Yeah, and like I said, we will try to identify how an ideal modeling framework, what parts of an ideal modeling framework that realistically can be included in times, as well as other modeling approaches. And things that we will focus on is temporal and spatial resolution, technologies, intersectoral connectivity, consumer behavior, model transparency, and user friendliness. This work is also well on its way. Like you see there, we are working on currently 8 deliverables, varying from review papers to discussion papers to journal papers. Whether or not all of this will be completed, I cannot answer now, but at least the first one is well on the way. So there are quite a lot of plans related to this modeling part. And like I said in the beginning, it's still possible to join this work if you're interested in that. Subtask C, like I said, it's about collaborating with IEA headquarters and ETSAP. So I just stole this nice figure from Paul. So the purpose here is to improve the modeling of hydrogen in times model and to be in dialogue with IEA if they are in need of certain improvements or certain advices. So, like I said, to propose times modeling improvements and to cooperate related to data and modeling. And why should we do this? Well, I guess both Paul and Kari said some of the reasons here, but especially like Paul said just recently, that a lot of different national times teams model hydrogen quite differently, or actually some do not model it at all. And of course, if you don't model hydrogen, or if you do it differently, the results will be based on that. And perhaps not in this year, but in previous of the reports from IEA, hydrogen has rarely been a part of the solution. I think that has to some extent changed, but that was one of the motivations to why we started this, because why is this happening? Is it because that hydrogen should not be a part of the solution, or is it related to the data, or is it related to the way that we are actually modeling hydrogen? So anyway, whatever reason it was, we wanted to investigate that more closely. And of course, everybody is in need of reliable data. So that's also a motivation here. So what is it that we are going to produce in this task? Just to summarize it all, we are going to, one of the main products here will be this database and related documentation to that. We are going most likely to produce different technology briefs. We are going to produce presentations to the Hydrogen Exco. Probably, if the world will be normal one day, we will like to be at conferences. We will, of course, produce a final report. And like I showed you before, we are working on several papers at the moment. So we will publish a lot of the work that we do. Like I said, if some of you are interested in joining this work, we are very open for new participants. So just send me an email if that is of relevance. So thank you very much. That was a very quick update of Task 41.
Okay, thank you very much, Arne. And thank you to both Arne and Paul for presenting in this session. I would like to ask a question to you, Arne, about the data and the data sets. Do you know when it will be sort of finalized? And do you also have a plan for regular updates, or is this something that will be done once?
The second one, there should be a regular update of this. How that actually will be done, I'm not sure at the moment, but that is something that we have discussed, and of course, data is a fresh, is something that is fresh, so yes. We need to update it. So, but whether somebody else is going to do that, or whether the group is going to work further, I cannot answer that. Regarding your first question, I think we have a plan to have something ready, perhaps March, April next year in the database. So and then expand upon that. So the first results from the database will probably be available around that time.
And that will be then an open database which is accessible for ETSAP members, or?
I hope so. That is my intention, but there are, and the group's intention as well. So I think so, and I hope so.
Yeah.
But
thank you. I can't see that there are any more questions in the chat, but there was a question which I think Paul has already written an answer to, but I would sort of like to also talk a little bit about it. Omkar is writing, we are not modeling hydrogen in our national times model, but we would like to begin with it. So is there any help he is asking for, training or workshop? And we are not planning actually to have any workshops or sort of a training in modeling of hydrogen, but we hope that the rest that will be provided and the report on modeling of hydrogen can be useful. And we of course also hope that the data sets that the hydrogen technology group will provide will be useful. But and it's possible, of course, to have hydrogen as a topic in future ETSAP workshops. But yeah, anyone else that do you want to comment more, Paul, to the questions that is written?
Well, I think you've done a good overview. I mean, I would like to tell somebody how to model hydrogen exactly. Coming up with general principles and offering offering different approaches in models, I think, is useful. That people need to make their own decisions that are appropriate for their own for the geography of their model and the design of their model. So I wouldn't want to go much further than that. I think by the end of this project there will be a number of resources that people can use to inform their modeling, and I hope the IE Hydrogen Task 41 will produce an improved data set going forwards as well. So one thing it will do is look across the various techniques, the various methods we use for modeling hydrogen, and that will include times, but it will include system dynamics models and all sorts of other things. Harry Blanco, which many people might know from the Times community, is leading the taxonomy paper. And then the data task, I'm hoping, will give us a much better grasp of the data issues that I talked about earlier, in terms of the capital costs, energy conversion efficiencies and such like. And certainly when we had the meeting on Monday, I gave them a wish list of data that we use in our models that we'd be particularly keen to see. Maybe if I just mention Anti's question, because that also came up on Monday, about HHV or LHV data. So one of the potential variations in the production efficiencies could be caused by people using either high heating value or low heating value data in their models. Now, I think from memory, I think I asked for high heating value data, but I can't. I haven't gone back to verify that was definitely the case. It's certainly what we use in our model, and I think we'll have to go back and talk to all the teams to see if they did use HHV or LHV. Because if people use LHV, then the efficiency will be much higher. You have a larger variation between the two for hydrogen than for any other fuel. So it's something we do need to worry about.
Okay, thank you very much. We can now close this session rather actually on time. So we have a 15 minutes break, 2 o'clock Central European time. We'll be back with a session on long-term versus short-term modeling. So have a coffee and relax for 15 minutes. And thank you very much for this session.
Thank you, Carrie.